The latest tranches of raw source documents uploaded directly to the digital tracking databases demonstrate that the modern disclosure movement is not an act of benevolent governmental transparency, but a highly coordinated damage control operation forced upon the intelligence apparatus by the exponential growth of civilian and military observation networks. The historic monopoly on information that allowed small agencies to keep these secrets buried behind weather balloon narratives throughout the 20th century has been entirely broken by the proliferation of global satellite tracking constellations, advanced multispectral imaging arrays, and private radar networks operated by independent research organizations. The defense establishment realized that it could no longer deny the physical reality of the data without completely destroying the public credibility of the military command structure. By establishing centralized research offices like the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the institutional hierarchy is attempting to institutionalize the phenomenon, reframing the conversation away from historical cover-ups and corporate legacy secrets, and placing it firmly within a sanitized framework of national security, flight safety, and global airspace management. When one carefully opens the original, unredacted historical records housed within the National Archives and contrasts them with the newly unsealed files, a chilling pattern of global coordination emerges that spans across international borders and adversarial boundaries. During the height of the Cold War, even as the United States and the Soviet Union stood on the absolute precipice of global nuclear annihilation, specialized communication channels were established between the two superpowers. To ensure that anomalous radar tracks over the Arctic Circle were not misidentified as an impending first strike, both nations routinely tracked the exact same anomalous objects entering their territorial airspaces at speeds exceeding 20,000 miles per hour, executing maneuvers that made it clear the craft were operating independent of human geopolitical alignments. These files show that the global security apparatus has long been aware that humanity is not the apex intelligence operating within this territorial domain, choosing to maintain an international consensus of absolute public silence to prevent the complete collapse of the economic, religious, and political systems that govern modern human society. The psychological impact of this hidden reality is documented within the private medical files of military personnel who have experienced close-range encounters with these craft. Declassified medical logs from the Defense Intelligence Agency describe a consistent suite of physiological and neurological injuries suffered by radar technicians, mechanics, and combat pilots who were exposed to the immediate proximity of the anomaly's propulsion fields. These injuries do not resemble conventional battlefield trauma, consisting instead of severe radiation burns to the deep tissue, unexplained chromosomal damage that mirrors exposure to intense electromagnetic fields, and complex neurological disruptions that alter the victim's cognitive processing and sensory perceptions for the remainder of their lives. The data proves that the localized fields generated by these objects project a highly dense, high-frequency radiation output that interacts violently with biological tissue, suggesting that the technology is intrinsically hazardous to human physiology in its unshielded state. This biological cost explains why early human reverse engineering programs faced devastating structural failures, with multiple technicians losing their lives in unacknowledged laboratory accidents while attempting to dismantle or activate recovered power systems. Furthermore, the unsealed material science reports from independent labs contracted by the Defense Department have revealed that the physical fragments recovered from various exclusion zones possess an atomic structure that cannot be replicated by any modern industrial manufacturing process. Analysis of these metallic specimens reveals that they are composed of hyperpure elemental isotopes layered together at the microscopic level, creating a composite material that is entirely devoid of the crystalline grain boundaries found in all terrestrial metals. This isotopic engineering allows the material to possess an almost impossible structural strength while remaining incredibly lightweight, functioning as a perfect waveguide for terahertz electromagnetic frequencies that can manipulate localized gravitational weight. The reports admit that while human scientists can observe these atomic structures under advanced electron microscopes, we lack the spatial manufacturing technology to align individual isotopes with the precision required to replicate the material's anomalous physical properties. We are looking at engineering artifacts that are hundreds of years ahead of our current industrial evolution, left behind like advanced machinery dropped into a primitive world. The legal battles currently occurring within the hidden chambers of the Senate Intelligence Committees are centered on a historic, high-stakes piece of legislation designed to break the corporate monopoly on these secrets once and for all. Independent lawmakers have introduced sweeping eminent domain clauses explicitly designed to force private defense monopolies to surrender any recovered technologies, physical craft, or biological evidence of unknown origin back to direct federal oversight and public scientific review. The language of these bills is shockingly precise, using terms like non-human intelligence and technologies of unknown origin to define the assets that are currently being shielded from congressional view. This legislative push has met with immense, aggressive resistance from the highest echelons of the military-industrial complex, with defense contractors spending massive amounts of lobbying capital to weaken the transparency requirements and ensure that the ultimate control of these world-altering technologies remains firmly inside their corporate vaults. The reality exposed by the unsealed archives is not a comforting story of impending scientific discovery or peaceful cosmic visitation. It is a gritty, high-stakes chronicle of institutional deception, corporate greed, and a deep, systemic panic that has gripped the highest levels of the global security state for nearly a century. The tracking portals are open, the telemetry has been verified by the most advanced sensor networks in human history, and the highest-ranking military authorities have been forced to admit under oath that physical objects of unknown origin are operating with absolute impunity within our sovereign airspace. The old ridicule curtain has been permanently torn away, leaving humanity to confront the unsettling truth that we are living inside a highly structured, closely monitored domain where our advanced technology is treated as nothing more than a primitive curiosity by an intelligence whose true nature remains entirely hidden from our sight. The files have been unlocked, the timeline is clear, and the world is left to decipher the true meaning of the message left inside the open archive. If you want to explore the next chapter of the classified records they tried to bury forever, click the video appearing on your screen right now. Welcome to the Lost Timeline.
The public release of these comprehensive files completely shifted the narrative, moving the phenomenon out of the domain of crazy theories and directly into the realm of data tracking and multi-layered government archives. When you analyze the complete data tranches, a distinct, undeniable structural pattern emerges that spans across decades of military records. These documents show that the phenomenon is not random, nor is it a series of disconnected events. The files are heavily clustered around three specific global constants: restricted military testing airspace, strategic naval strike groups, and continental nuclear weapons infrastructure. The records demonstrate a systematic, highly intelligent monitoring of human atomic capability that has deeply alarmed the highest levels of national defense for generations. The most terrifying files within the newly opened databases do not just detail passive observation, but active physical intervention in human strategic assets. One of the most heavily documented incidents in the unsealed archive occurred in March of 1967 at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. According to the official logs and corroborated by the formal statements of Captain Robert Salas, a highly structured, glowing red orb materialized directly over the heavily guarded perimeter gate of a nuclear missile launch facility. Within seconds of the object's arrival, the monitoring panels inside the deep underground concrete silo began flashing catastrophic warning alerts. One by one, 10 separate Minuteman nuclear missiles, the primary atomic deterrent of the nation, were instantly pulled into a completely disabled no-go launch state. The weapon systems were not physically damaged, nor were the secure landline cables cut. The guidance computers were systematically shut down by an external electromagnetic force that human engineering could neither replicate nor block. This pattern of structural intrusion is echoed across hundreds of files spanning from the East Coast to the deep waters of the Pacific. The archives track decades of regular encounters where unknown structured craft didn't just observe human assets. They actively jammed the military-grade tracking systems of elite naval aviation wings. During prolonged tactical engagements, advanced Spy-1 Navy radar arrays recorded multiple objects descending from the upper boundaries of space, dropping from above 80,000 feet down to sea level in less than a fraction of a second. The objects would hover completely stationary over the ocean for hours, resisting high-velocity jet stream currents, before accelerating vertically back into the low Earth orbit at hypersonic velocities that rendered human countermeasures completely useless. When you look across the entire timeline of these files, the core conflict is no longer focused on whether these anomalies are real, but rather who actually holds the proprietary rights to their manufacturing and operational origins. The unsealed documents present two highly sophisticated, competing arguments that define the reality of the situation. The first argument states that these anomalies represent a massive, generation-defining leap in terrestrial human technology, developed in absolute isolation within a hypercompartmentalized, unacknowledged special access program buried deep inside the military-industrial complex, or within the hidden research labs of a foreign adversary. If a terrestrial competitor has quietly mastered the science of gravity manipulation, transmedium travel, and inertia-free acceleration, the contemporary balance of global military power has already been permanently disrupted. Every aircraft carrier, stealth bomber, and intercontinental ballistic missile currently in existence is rendered completely obsolete, incapable of defending against an asset that can materialize inside sovereign airspace instantly. However, high-ranking military commanders and independent analysts have repeatedly challenged this terrestrial explanation within the classified files. They point out that it is industrially impossible to develop an entirely new paradigm of physics, build highly complex manufacturing supply lines, and test physical platforms over generations without a single trace leak entering the global academic, economic, or logistical sectors. The alternative argument, which is now being openly debated within closed congressional briefings, is that these files document a direct, ongoing intelligence encounter with a non-human intelligence whose origin lies completely outside the boundaries of modern human civilization. The data streams published across the official tracking servers explicitly track these craft displaying true transmedium capabilities, moving seamlessly between the vacuum of space, the dense layers of our atmosphere, and the extreme high-pressure environments of the deep ocean without any observable structural degradation or loss of velocity. This specific capability has fundamentally upended the classical understanding of aerospace dynamics, because any known human craft designed to travel at high speeds through the air would be crushed instantly by the immense hydrodynamic drag forces encountered upon hitting the surface of the water. The physical behavior of these objects suggests that they do not interact with the matter surrounding them. Rather, they project a highly localized field that bends the space-time fabric around the craft, allowing it to slip through air and water as if it were moving through an absolute vacuum. The official files further document how this hidden reality has triggered a profound legislative civil war within the corridors of the Capitol. This internal conflict reached a public breaking point during formal congressional hearings, where highly decorated intelligence veterans and military whistleblowers delivered formal testimony under penalty of perjury. David Grush, a respected intelligence officer who served as the official representative to the government's primary investigation task forces, stated under oath that the executive branch has maintained a highly covert, multi-decade crash retrieval and reverse engineering program operating completely outside the legal boundaries of congressional oversight. Grush testified that private aerospace monopolies have been granted direct access to recovered physical materials, craft components, and biological evidence of unknown origin, shielding the technology inside corporate vaults to avoid the mandatory disclosure laws that govern public federal agencies. This corporate capture of state secrets has allowed a highly insular group of defense contractors to attempt to reverse engineer advanced propulsion systems, weaponizing the breakthroughs for private corporate dominance while withholding the clean energy and material science implications from the global scientific community. The files make it clear that the battle is no longer just about the objects in the sky. It is about who controls the fundamental technologies that could reshape human civilization on Earth.
Imagine sitting in the cockpit of a multi-million-dollar fighter jet, cruising at 20,000 feet over a dark, stormy ocean, when suddenly every alarm on your instrument panel begins to scream. Your radar system, the most advanced sensor network built by human hands, locks onto an object floating completely motionless directly in your flight path. It has no wings, no visible engines, no windows, and it is defying the laws of gravity as if our physics do not even exist. For nearly a century, the people who run our society told us that anyone who saw something like this was crazy. They told us that pilots were hallucinating, that civilian eyewitnesses were looking at weather balloons, and that the strange lights in the sky were just a trick of the mind. But behind the closed doors of the Pentagon, a terrifyingly different reality was being tracked, analyzed, and systematically hidden from the human race. The illusion of our empty skies has officially shattered. With the historic launch of the military's latest unsealed data portals under the presidential directive known as the Pursue Initiative, the state has been legally forced to hand over its most guarded secrets. We are no longer looking at late-night campfire stories or blurry home videos. We are staring directly at high-definition thermal imaging logs, military radar tracks, and the sworn testimonies of elite combat pilots who looked these anomalies directly in the eye. This is not a fun story about space. Visitors. It is a clinical breakdown of a century-long psychological war waged against the public to hide the fact that we have completely lost control of our own airspace. To understand how this grand illusion was built, you have to travel back to the summer of 1947, to a remote expanse of desert brush near Roswell, New Mexico. Following a night of violent electrical storms that lit up the desert sky, a local ranch manager stepped outside and discovered a massive, chaotic debris field stretching across thousands of yards of open sand. The fragments scattered across the dirt didn't resemble anything from an ordinary aircraft crash. There were ultra-lightweight structural beams that refused to snap or bend under immense pressure, strange foil-like membranes that instantly memory returned to their original shape when crumpled in a fist, and metallic surfaces etched with bizarre geometric characters that no language expert could decipher. When the local military personnel from the Roswell Army Airfield arrived to secure the site, the sheer panic in the chain of command led to a historic blunder. The base commander authorized an official press release, stating that the military had recovered a flying disc from a local ranch. It was a headline that sent shockwaves across the entire globe, but within 24 hours, the highest echelons of the executive defense staff realized the catastrophic nature of the leak and swooped in to erase the truth. A secondary press conference was hastily called, featuring an ordinary rubber weather balloon and cardboard radar targets spread across an office floor. The public was told to laugh it off, instructed that a low-level officer had simply misidentified a common weather instrument. For decades, that clumsy weather balloon story remained the legally enforced truth, maintained through aggressive non-disclosure agreements, calculated media mockery, and the direct intimidation of the local citizens who had touched the physical materials. Yet, when the inner vaults of the defense establishment were recently forced open, the weather balloon story was exposed as a complete and total lie. The wreckage recovered in the New Mexico desert did not belong to a routine meteorological unit. It belonged to an ultra-classified, multi-billion-dollar atomic surveillance initiative known as Project Mogul. This massive operation utilized long trains of high-altitude balloons equipped with revolutionary, ultra-sensitive acoustic sensors designed to float into the upper stratosphere to detect the shockwaves of Soviet nuclear test detonations across the hemisphere. The intense terror that gripped Washington in 1947 was not driven by an alien invasion, but by the realization that their most critical, highly classified espionage asset had inadvertently fallen into plain sight of the public at the very dawn of the Cold War. They realized that if the public knew the truth, the Soviet Union would also discover the existence of America's secret atomic ear in the sky. The Roswell cover-up taught the military apparatus a dark, highly effective lesson. Civilian curiosity could be easily managed through instant psychological manipulation and the weaponization of public ridicule. As sighting reports from commercial aviators and trained military radar technicians began to skyrocket throughout the 1950s, the United States Air Force established a series of formal investigative bodies designed to capture and neutralize public panic. This systematic psychological campaign culminated in the formation of Project Blue Book. Publicly, the government presented Blue Book as a serious, scientific effort to investigate every airspace anomaly to ensure national safety. Privately, declassified personal journals and internal memos reveal a vastly more cynical reality. The primary mandate of Blue Book was not to find the truth, but to aggressively debunk, minimize, and dismiss every single report using any available natural or man-made explanation, no matter how absurd it sounded. Over its tenure, Project Blue Book logged more than 12,000 sightings. The vast majority were quickly filed away as misidentified stars, swamp gas, or commercial flights. But despite the immense pressure to reduce every file to a normal phenomenon, a persistent core percentage of the database completely defied explanation. These were close-range encounters with structured, physical craft executing instantaneous right-angled turns at supersonic velocities, climbing to extreme altitudes without generating any visible lift, and remaining perfectly stationary inside high-velocity jet streams without any observable propulsion systems or exhaust trails. The deep moral crisis inside the government's cover-up became public through its own chief scientific consultant, an internationally respected astronomer named Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Initially hired by the Air Force to act as the primary scientific skeptic who could provide quick astronomical excuses for anomalies, Hynek underwent a profound transformation as he gained access to the raw military logs. he discovered that the Air Force was routinely falsifying sensor data, completely ignoring radar telemetry from elite military operators, and intimidating commercial pilots into altering their official statements under threat of losing their licenses. Hynek realized that the most compelling, terrifying cases were being intentionally buried to prevent independent scientific analysis from revealing the truth. When the project was officially terminated in 1969, the government confidently asserted to the media that further study of the phenomenon was entirely unwarranted, stating that no unidentified object had ever displayed capabilities beyond human technological limits or threatened national defense. For nearly 40 years, this statement remained the absolute official reality, ensuring that any serious scientific study of the phenomenon remained permanently locked outside the boundaries of mainstream society. But while the public face of the state maintained that the skies were completely clear, the hidden machinery of the intelligence community was quietly funneling billions of dollars in black budget capital into highly covert research programs. The illusion of total government disinterest was permanently shattered in late 2017, when an explosive intelligence leak revealed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.